Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
The first words out of my daughter's mouth when she called me at my duty station in Iraq were, "Daddy, please come home." "What's wrong, baby?" I asked, dread already creeping in. "It's Mom," Alice whispered, and even through the poor video quality, I could tell she was in tears. "What's wrong with Mom?" "She's seeing another man," she sobbed. My heart stopped. Karen, my wife of 17 years, had always been so dedicated to me and our daughter. "How do you know?" I asked, not believing. "Surely you're mistaken." "No, Dad. She's out with him 2 or 3 nights a week. Sometimes she doesn't come home until 2 or 3 in the morning. This morning she didn't come home until almost 7. Dad, I'm scared." Bile rose in my throat as I forced the next question out. "Do you know who this man is, Alice?" "I think his name is Mark something, Mark Jenkins." A long pause followed. "Yes, that's him." Alice's voice was barely a whisper now. "I've only seen him once when he picked Mom up. Tall, kind of skinny with short black and gray hair. He drives a big fancy car, sometimes even a limo." Mark Jenkins, the city councilman. That made sense. Karen had worked on his election campaign. But why was she coming home so late? "I need you here, Daddy. Please come home," Alice begged me. "Honey, I'll do my best, but whatever you do, don't say anything to your mom." "I won't, Dad, but please hurry before something really bad happens." "I'll do my best. I love you, Alice." "Love you too, Dad. My name is John Miller. I'm 43 years old, a design specialist for a large tech company, and a captain in the Army Reserve. Right now I'm on a 6-month assignment in Iraq, serving on the command staff. I've been married to Karen for 17 years, and we have a beautiful 14-year-old daughter, Alice. Karen is 41 but could easily pass for younger. She's the most stunning woman I've ever seen, 5'7", with a figure that only improved after having our daughter. Her blonde hair falls to her shoulders, and her blue eyes always sparkle when she smiles, which is often, or at least it used to be. I've never doubted Karen's loyalty, not once. Even during my deployments, she's been nothing but loving and supportive. So what the hell happened? I filed all the necessary paperwork for 30 days of emergency family leave and caught a flight home. 26 hours later, I found myself renting a car at my hometown airport, heading toward a house that no longer felt like home. It was Thursday night, 6:30 p.m., and the early December sun had already set. The streetlights cast an eerie glow on the quiet neighborhood. I parked half a block away from my house, not ready to face what might lie inside. From where I sat, I could see lights on in the living room, kitchen, and the master bedroom upstairs. Karen walked past the window a few times, and I realized she was getting ready to go out. My heart pounded as I called Alice's cell phone. "Daddy?" Her voice was soft, as though she were afraid of being overheard. "Yes, baby, I'm here, just a few houses away." "Oh, Daddy, thank you," she whispered, and I could hear her start to cry. "Is your mom going out tonight?" "Yeah, I think so. She's been in her room for over an hour. I heard the shower, and now she's humming. She sounds really excited about her night." The thought of it made my stomach churn. "Don't worry, baby. I'll follow them, see what's really going on." "Be careful, Daddy," she said. "I will, and don't worry, you and I will always be together, no matter what." "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Alice." At 7, a sleek black BMW pulled into my driveway. A tall, slender man stepped out of the car. I recognized him immediately, Mark Jenkins. He didn't even go to the door. Instead, he spoke briefly on his cell phone, and seconds later, the lights in the master bedroom flicked off. The front door opened, and Karen stepped out. She looked stunning in a short, fitted dress, her blonde hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. My heart shattered as I watched her smile and walk quickly to Mark, giving him a warm kiss on the mouth. She glanced back at the house, making sure Alice wasn't watching, and then climbed into the car. I snapped a photo of the kiss with my cell phone, my hands trembling with rage. I followed them, keeping a safe distance, my mind racing as I tried to process what I had just seen. They drove across town and pulled into the parking lot of the Bristol Hotel. They exited the car, arms around each other like a married couple, comfortable and familiar. I took another picture. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't some casual friendship or business relationship. My wife was having an affair with Mark Jenkins, and it had clearly been going on for a long time. I waited until they were inside before following. The hotel was buzzing with activity, as there was a charity event being held in the ballroom on the third floor. I ignored the elevator and took the stairs, not wanting to be noticed. When I reached the top, I found the ballroom easily, the music from the live orchestra guiding me. I walked slowly past the entrance, and there they were, just inside, mingling with guests, looking every bit the happy couple. My wife even glanced at me for a second, but didn't recognize me. Why would she? As far as she knew, I was still thousands of miles away, dodging bullets in Iraq. I also noticed that she wasn't wearing her wedding rings. I found the nearest bathroom and locked myself in a stall. My hands shook as I tried to gather my thoughts. How could she betray me like this? Our marriage, which I thought was rock solid, had clearly crumbled without me even noticing. My wife, the mother of my child, was having an affair with another man while I was away, serving my country. I wiped away the tears that had begun to fall and told myself to stay focused. This wasn't the time for self-pity. I had a mission now, a new enemy to confront, and I needed solid proof. I stayed in the bathroom for about 30 minutes, giving the event enough time to be in full swing. When I finally made my way back to the ballroom, I positioned myself near a pillar where I could observe them without being noticed. The place was full of well-dressed couples, sipping champagne and enjoying the music, but all I could focus on was Karen and Jenkins. They were dancing, her arms draped around his neck, her head resting against his chest, and his hands casually placed on her hips, pulling her close. I fought the urge to storm in and punch the guy, but I knew that wouldn't help. What I needed was irrefutable proof, and I needed to be smart about it. I managed to snap a few more photos while they swayed to the slow music. Their intimacy was nauseating, and it took every ounce of self-control not to interrupt their little moment. Karen looked like she was in a dream, completely lost in the moment, completely forgetting she was still a married woman, the mother of a teenage daughter. After a few more dances, they left the dance floor and made their way to a table, where they shared a brief kiss before sitting down. I captured that moment too. I had enough evidence now to confirm what I had suspected from Alice's call. My wife was not just being unfaithful. She was brazenly parading her affair in public, in front of the very people we once called friends. I left the ballroom quietly and found a seat in the hallway, close enough to watch the elevator and ballroom doors. Patience is a skill I learned well in the military, and I knew I would need it now. It wasn't until about 2 hours later that the event started winding down. People began trickling out of the ballroom, couples laughing and chatting as they made their way to the elevators. Finally, Karen and Jenkins emerged, still holding hands, her head resting on his shoulder as they exchanged quiet words. I watched as they walked toward the elevator, and instead of pressing the button to go down, they opted for the one that would take them up. It was all I needed to see. I followed, staying far enough behind that they wouldn't notice me. When the elevator doors opened, I could see they had gone to the 11th floor. My stomach churned. They weren't leaving. They were heading upstairs, probably to a room where they could continue their night. I clenched my fists, but forced myself to remain calm. Once they were out of sight, I went to the front desk, showing my government ID. "Excuse me, I have an urgent message for Councilman Mark Jenkins, and I need to deliver it personally. Could you tell me which room he's in?" The young woman behind the desk looked nervous. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out that information." "I understand, but it's critical. It's a government matter." I pointed to the ID again, giving her a hard stare. She hesitated, but eventually gave in. "Room 1105. "Thank you." I nodded and walked away, the rage bubbling inside me with every step. I didn't go straight to the room. Instead, I found the stairwell and opened the door just enough to prop it with a handkerchief, ensuring it wouldn't lock behind me. From there, I could watch the hallway that led to their room. It was only a matter of time now. I looked at my watch. It was just past midnight. Alice had told me Karen usually came home between 2 and 3 a.m., sometimes later. So I waited. As the minutes ticked by, all I could think about was Karen with him, their hands all over each other. My mind filled with images of them in bed together, of her laughing with him, touching him the way she used to touch me. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they wouldn't leave. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. At around 1:30 a.m., I stepped out of the stairwell and pressed my ear to their door. Faint sounds came through, soft moans, whispers. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, clear as day, I heard Karen's voice, breathless and pleading. Yes, oh God, yes, do me, Mark. Do me hard like that. You're so good. It was the final blow. My wife, the woman I had loved for 17 years, was in there, passionately making love to another man, moaning his name like she had once done with me. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. I had to stay focused. I went back to the stairwell, my body shaking with rage. They would be leaving soon, and I wanted to be there when they did. This time, I wasn't going to stay hidden. At 2 a.m., I positioned myself outside their door, my phone set to record. 15 minutes later, I heard the chain slide off and the door click open. As they stepped out, I began recording. Jenkins had his arm around her protectively, and Karen leaned into him, smiling like a woman completely satisfied. "How's the screwing going, Karen?" I asked, my voice low and filled with venom. Karen's face paled instantly, her smile vanishing as she froze in place. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, John? No, please." She crumbled to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Jenkins took a second longer to process what was happening. When he finally realized who I was, he straightened, but his face turned red with panic. "Hey man, this isn't what it looks like. She was just helping me with my new campaign." "Yeah," I said, barely able to contain the disgust in my voice. "I can tell. I guess screwing a soldier's wife is a new campaign strategy, huh? I wonder how the voters are going to feel when they hear that you've been screwing an army officer's wife while he was overseas in Iraq defending his country." Jenkins took a step forward, raising his hands like he could calm me down. "Now wait a minute, John. You've got this all wrong. There's nothing going on here, right, Karen?" I didn't give her a chance to respond. "Don't bother, Councilman. I saw you at my house, kissing her on the porch. I followed you both here, watched you dance, saw how cozy you were, and as if that wasn't enough, I heard you two through the door. Do me, Mark, right? You won, Jenkins. My wife is all yours." Karen was sobbing on the floor, her shoulders shaking violently. She looked up at me through tear-filled eyes, barely able to speak. "John, please, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I snapped, glaring down at her. "Sorry for what, Karen? Sorry I found out? Sorry you got caught? Or are you just sorry that your perfect little affair is over? Whatever it is, don't bother. You've made your choices, and now you'll live with them. You and your new lover can carry on all you want, but you've lost me and our daughter forever." Jenkins stood there, his face pale as he stammered. "Look, this doesn't have to go public. We can figure something out." "I already have," I said coldly. "I'm filing for divorce first thing Monday morning, and trust me, this is going public. I'm sure the voters will be interested to know what kind of man they've been supporting." I turned to walk away, but Karen's voice, weak and broken, called after me. "John, please, don't tell Alice, please don't." I stopped, turning just enough to glare at her. Too late. Alice is the one who told me what was going on. She knew before I did. She's been watching you sneak out night after night, wondering why her mother was abandoning her. I hope whatever you had with him was worth it, because it cost you everything else." Karen collapsed into sobs, her hands clutching the floor. Jenkins stood there, silent, unable to even look me in the eye. I walked toward the elevator, ignoring their pathetic cries. As I pressed the button, I couldn't help but feel a sick satisfaction, knowing that everything they had built on lies and betrayal was now crashing down around them. When I got home, Alice was waiting for me, curled up on the couch in her pajamas. She jumped up the moment I walked through the door, running to me and wrapping her arms around my waist. "Daddy, did you find them?" I knelt down, looking into her tear-streaked face. "Yes, baby, I found them, and I'm so sorry you had to go through this." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I hate her, Daddy. I hate what she did to you, to us. I know, sweetheart, but no matter what happens between your mother and me, we'll always be together, okay? I promise." She nodded, clinging to me as I held her close. For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself to cry. Not just for me, but for Alice, for everything we had lost. My heart ached for my daughter and the pain she had been forced to endure because of her mother's betrayal. That night, we both slept fitfully. I stayed on the couch, not trusting that Karen and Jenkins hadn't defiled our bed. Alice slept in her room, but every now and then I would hear her stir, likely haunted by the same thoughts that were tormenting me. The next day, Alice and I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. We had breakfast together, cleaned up around the house, and talked about what life would look like once I filed for divorce. Alice was adamant she didn't want to stay with her mother while I was away in Iraq, so I promised to arrange for her to stay with my mother until I got back. As we washed the dishes, the phone rang. Alice looked at me, unsure if she should answer, but I nodded, and she picked it up. "Hello." "Oh, Mom. Yes, he's here, but no, he doesn't want to talk to you right now." There was a long pause as Alice listened. I could see the frustration and anger building in her expression. "Mom, you've been lying to us for months. I don't believe for a second that you're sorry." Another pause. "No, Mom, I was the one who called Dad. I needed him here." Alice's voice grew colder. "Why would I ask him not to hurt Mark? He deserves everything that's coming to him for what he did to us." "You both do." She slammed the phone down, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at me. "She just doesn't get it, Dad. She really doesn't understand what she's done." I hugged her tightly. "She will, Alice. Trust me, she will." The rest of the day passed quietly, the house filled with an uneasy calm. Alice did her best to distract me, but my mind was already racing with thoughts of how I would handle Karen's return and the inevitable divorce. That afternoon, Karen called again. I answered the phone, but as soon as I heard her shaky voice saying, "John, please let me explain," I passed it to Alice. I didn't have the energy to hear her excuses. "What do you want, Mom?" Alice's voice was firm. "You don't need to explain anything. We know exactly what you've been doing." There was a long pause before Alice's voice turned sharp again. "Mom, you've been cheating on Dad for months. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And now you've destroyed our family." Alice paused again, her expression softening as she listened. Then she let out a bitter laugh. "Birth control pills, Mom? Really? That's what you need? Well, I'll make sure we pack them up for you." She hung up the phone and looked at me, tears in her eyes once again. "She doesn't even care, Dad. All she wants is her clothes and her damn pills." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "We'll pack them up for her. But I promise you, Alice, before this is over, your mom and that bastard will feel the consequences of what they've done." And I meant every word. The rest of the weekend passed in a tense silence, with both Alice and me trying to avoid the painful reality of what was happening. Sunday evening, we packed up Karen's clothes, her makeup, and, yes, her birth control pills. Alice was still bitter about that request, but I told her we were doing this to put her mother behind us, to close that chapter and move on. By Monday morning, everything was packed neatly in bags by the curb, ready for Karen to pick up. I made sure not to be in the house when she came by. I couldn't stomach the thought of seeing her, not yet. Alice stayed inside too, not wanting any further confrontation. We sat quietly, watching through the window as a black BMW, Jenkins no doubt, pulled up and Karen got out, looking around nervously. She loaded everything into the car, her movements jerky and hesitant, as if she knew we were watching but was too ashamed to look at us. Alice didn't say a word, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the clenched fists in her lap. I reached over, squeezing her hand, and we stayed like that until Karen drove away. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Rachel Collins, and told her I was ready for Karen to be served with divorce papers. "We'll do it at my house," I said. "She's coming over to talk. 2 p.m. Rachel's tone was cool but supportive. "We'll have someone there. Just stay calm and let the process happen. You've got the upper hand." At exactly 2 p.m., Karen knocked on the door. When I opened it, she stood there looking as beautiful as ever, but the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. My heart clenched at the sight of her. It wasn't easy seeing the woman I had loved for years standing on the other side of a betrayal this deep. We sat at the kitchen table, where we had shared so many meals, so many moments of happiness as a family. Now it felt like a battlefield, and I was ready to make my move. "John, please, I need to talk to you," Karen began, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you, but we can fix this. If you just give me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice calm but hard. "Explain how you've been screwing Mark Jenkins for months while I was fighting a war on the other side of the world. You think there's an explanation for that, Karen? Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. It wasn't like that. I was lonely, John. You were gone, and I didn't know how to handle it. Mark was just there for me when I needed someone. I laughed bitterly. There for you? In your bed, Karen? Do you even realize what you've done to our family, to Alice? Her face crumpled and she whispered, I know I've hurt you both. I hate myself for it, but John, I love you. I never stopped loving you. You have a funny way of showing it, I said coldly. Sleeping with another man for half a year doesn't exactly scream love. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Karen's face paled as I stood up to answer it. The process server stood there with an envelope in hand. Are you Karen Miller? He asked. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. He handed her the envelope. You've been served. For a long moment, Karen just stared at the envelope in her hands, her face pale as she realized what was happening. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked back up at me, pleading. John, please, don't do this. We can still fix it. I shook my head, feeling nothing but cold resolve. No, Karen, we can't. It's over. She crumpled into a sobbing heap, clutching the envelope to her chest. I love you. I never wanted this to happen. I stood up, unable to look at her any longer. You made your choice, Karen. Now you have to live with it. She cried as I walked away, her sobs echoing in the empty space that had once been our home. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. The next day, the town was buzzing with gossip. The local newspaper ran a story with the headline, Councilman's Affair with Soldier's Wife Exposed. Small town scandal rocks community. Underneath was a grainy photo of Karen and Jenkins, arm in arm, exiting the Bristol Hotel. The caption read, Does her deployed Army husband know? By noon, it was all over the news. Jenkins' office went into damage control, trying to claim the photo was fake, that it had been doctored by political opponents. But no one bought it. People had seen them together for months, acting like a couple, not caring who noticed. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. People who had witnessed the affair firsthand started calling the newspaper, confirming that Karen and Jenkins had been openly carrying on their relationship for months. Soon, public pressure mounted, and Jenkins was forced to hold a press conference. I watched from home as he stood at the podium, flanked by a few remaining staff members, looking like a man desperate to save his career. I categorically deny the accusations being made against me, Jenkins said, his voice shaking slightly. I have never engaged in an affair with Mrs. Karen Miller, nor have I ever jeopardized the integrity of my position. These baseless rumors are a smear campaign, nothing more. Halfway through his speech, something incredible happened. Karen, looking pale and broken, pushed her way through the crowd of reporters and took the microphone. My name is Karen Miller, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I'm the wife of Captain John Miller, and for the past 6 months, I've been having an affair with Mark Jenkins. Gasps rippled through the room as Jenkins' face went from red to ghostly white. Karen, stop this! You're lying! No, I'm not, Karen said, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's time we both admit what we've done. I'm ashamed of myself for betraying my husband, for destroying our family. But I will not let you lie about it any longer. She turned to face Jenkins, her voice shaking with raw emotion. Mark, you knew I was married. You knew my husband was deployed in Iraq, and still you pursued me. And I was weak enough to let you. Now I've lost everything because of you, because of us. The room was silent as Karen looked directly into the cameras, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry. With that, she turned and fled the room, leaving Jenkins standing alone, his career in ruins. The reporters swarmed him, but he said nothing, his reputation shattered beyond repair. The city council announced Jenkins' resignation the next day. He had packed up and left town, leaving no forwarding address. Karen didn't go with him. As for me, I returned to Iraq a week later, carrying the weight of betrayal and loss. Alice stayed with my mother, and I promised her that when I came back, we'd start over, just the two of us. And Karen? A few weeks later, she moved in with Jenkins, only for the two of them to disappear from town not long after. I heard rumors about where they went, but I didn't care. I had my daughter, and that was all that mattered now. Months passed, and I threw myself into my work. The desert heat, the long days, and the adrenaline of being in a war zone kept me going. kept me from thinking too much about the devastation Karen had left behind. But at night, when the silence of the desert settled in, it was harder to escape the thoughts, the memories of what my life used to be before everything crumbled. Every night, I'd call Alice. She was the only thing keeping me grounded, the only person I could still trust. Her voice, her laughter, and her determination to push through everything made me proud, even as it tore me apart, knowing that I'd left her to deal with the fallout of her mother's betrayal. "Daddy, I'm okay," she would tell me, her voice steady but soft. "I miss you, but Grandma's been great. I've even made some new friends here." Hearing that gave me a small bit of comfort, but I could still hear the pain she was trying to hide. It was the same pain I carried with me every day, the kind that doesn't fade easily. Then one night, during a routine patrol, everything changed. Our convoy was ambushed on a dusty stretch of road outside a small Iraqi town. We'd been moving supplies when the first shots rang out. Chaos erupted, and in the span of minutes, my world turned upside down once again. I don't remember much after the explosion. The searing pain in my leg, the deafening sound of gunfire, and the frantic voices of my comrades shouting orders. But I remember hitting the ground, blood pooling around me as I stared up at the endless expanse of sky. I thought that might be it, that maybe I wouldn't make it home to Alice after all. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a military hospital, groggy and disoriented, my body wrapped in bandages. It took a moment for everything to come back to me, for the pain to register, but then I looked down and saw the empty space where my left leg used to be. I'd lost my leg in the ambush. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That's what they called it. But all I could think about was how much more I'd lost, how much had been taken from me, not just my leg, but my marriage, my family, my sense of security. For weeks, I stayed in that hospital, going through surgeries and physical therapy. It was grueling work, and every day felt like a battle just to regain some semblance of normalcy. But Alice was my lifeline. She called every day, just like before, and her voice kept me going. "Daddy, you're a fighter," she'd say. "You're going to get through this, and when you come home, we're going to be okay. Just you and me." After months of recovery, I was finally released and sent home. Alice was there waiting for me, standing by the airport terminal, her eyes shining with tears as I hobbled toward her on my new prosthetic leg. "Oh, Daddy," she cried, rushing into my arms. I held her tight, feeling the overwhelming relief of being back with my daughter. She was the only thing I had left that mattered. And in that moment, I knew I was going to fight like hell to rebuild our lives together. It wasn't easy. Life back home was a constant struggle, adjusting to the loss of my leg, the stares from strangers, and the memories of what Karen had done. I never spoke to her again after the divorce, and as far as I knew, she had disappeared from town with Jenkins, leaving behind the wreckage of our marriage. But Alice and I found a way to move forward. I took a job as a design specialist for a large tech company, using the skills I'd honed over the years to build a new career. It was hard work, but it was honest, and it gave me something to focus on besides the pain. Alice and I grew closer than ever. She was my rock, and I was hers. We leaned on each other, and slowly, the wounds started to heal. I knew I would never fully recover from everything that had happened, but I also knew that as long as I had my daughter, I had a reason to keep going. Years later, when people ask me about what happened, about the war, the betrayal, and the long road back to recovery, I'd tell them the same thing. Life doesn't always go the way you plan, but you fight for the people you love. You fight for what matters. Because in the end, that's all we can do. As the years passed, life slowly found a new rhythm. Alice grew up to be a strong, independent young woman. She graduated high school with honors and went off to college, determined to carve her own path. I couldn't have been prouder, but at the same time, it was hard to let her go. She had been my reason for surviving the darkest moments, my anchor, and now she was leaving to start her own life. When she left for college, the house felt emptier than ever. I'd gotten used to the noise, the laughter, the shared moments between us. Now, it was just me. The silence became another reminder of everything that had changed, of the family that had once been whole and was now just fragments of the past. But Alice called often, just like she had when I was in Iraq. Her voice always filled with excitement about her new experiences, helped to ease the loneliness. She'd tell me about her classes, her friends, and all the plans she was making for the future. Each time I could hear the strength in her voice, the resilience that had grown out of everything we'd been through. I kept busy with work. The tech company had been good to me, and I'd worked my way up to a senior position. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was younger, but it was fulfilling in its own way. I had a routine, a sense of purpose, and that kept me grounded. Every now and then the past would come knocking. People in town would ask me if I'd heard anything about Karen or Jenkins. I always gave the same answer, no, and I don't care to. The truth was, I didn't know where they were or what had become of them, and I didn't want to know. After Karen had left town with Jenkins, she had tried reaching out a few times, letters, emails, a few calls, but I never responded. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. There was no going back. It wasn't easy to forgive, but I had learned to move on. For Alice's sake, I had to. She was my world now, and I couldn't let the past drag me down any longer. I refused to let Karen's betrayal define the rest of my life. One day, years after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Karen. My heart pounded as I held the envelope in my hand, debating whether or not to open it. Part of me didn't want to know what she had to say. I had buried the past as best as I could, and I wasn't eager to dig it up again. But curiosity got the better of me, and I tore the envelope open. The letter was long and filled with regret. Karen apologized, over and over again, for the pain she had caused me and Alice. She wrote about how her relationship with Jenkins had fallen apart not long after they left town. She had been living alone for years, plagued by guilt and shame for what she had done. I know it's too late for forgiveness, she wrote, but I want you to know that I think about you and Alice every day. I lost everything because of my selfishness, and it's something I'll never be able to fix. But I hope, wherever you are, that you found happiness. You deserved so much more than I ever gave you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words on the page. The anger I had felt for so long had dulled over the years, replaced by a quiet sadness. Karen had ruined our marriage, and there was no repairing the damage. But in the end, we had both paid the price. I didn't respond to the letter. There was nothing left to say. Now, as I look back on everything that's happened, I realize that life rarely turns out the way we expect. I'd once thought that my marriage to Karen would last forever, that we'd grow old together and watch Alice build her own family. But life had different plans. What I've learned is that you can't control what happens to you. All you can control is how you respond. The pain, the betrayal, it all taught me something important. It taught me how to fight for myself, for my daughter, and for a future that wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. In the end, it wasn't about the war or the betrayal. It was about finding a way to keep going, to build something new out of the wreckage. And with Alice by my side, I've done just that. The years went by, and I settled into the quiet life I had built for myself. Alice graduated from college and started her career, making a name for herself in the world. She was my pride and joy, and every time I looked at her, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Despite everything that had happened, we had made it through. She had turned out to be an incredible woman, strong and resilient. We stayed close, even as she moved away to pursue her career. She visited often, always making sure to check in on me, though I could tell she worried. Maybe she thought I was lonely, that I had been alone for too long. But the truth was, I had found peace in the solitude. The scars from the past hadn't completely faded, but they no longer held me prisoner. One day, Alice brought someone with her. His name was Michael, and from the way they looked at each other, I knew this was serious. I had always wondered what it would be like when Alice finally found someone. I wanted her to be happy, but part of me was afraid to let her go. She had been my anchor for so long, my reason to keep moving forward. Now, she had found her own path. Michael was a good man. He treated Alice with the kind of respect and love I had always hoped she would find. They talked about getting married, and soon enough, the wedding plans were in full swing. Alice wanted me to walk her down the aisle, a moment I had once feared I might never see. The wedding day came, and I stood in the small chapel, watching as Alice prepared to take this next step in her life. She looked radiant in her white dress, her eyes sparkling with joy. As I walked her down the aisle, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. Through all the pain, the betrayal, and the loss, we had emerged stronger, closer than ever. The ceremony was beautiful, and I couldn't have been prouder as I watched Alice and Michael exchange their vows. It was a new chapter for both of them, and for me, it was a reminder that life goes on, no matter what. After the wedding, life became quieter. Alice and Michael moved out of state for work, and I found myself alone again in the house that had once been filled with so much laughter and noise. But this time, the loneliness didn't weigh me down. I had come to terms with the past, and I knew that Alice was happy and thriving. I continued my work with the tech company, and over time, I began to think about retirement. The idea of slowing down and enjoying the simple things in life appealed to me more and more as the years went on. A few years later, Alice and Michael had their first child, a beautiful baby girl they named Sarah. Becoming a grandfather was something I had never really thought about, but when I held Sarah in my arms for the first time, it felt like everything had come full circle. The next generation, a fresh start, a reminder that life continues to move forward no matter the heartaches or the triumphs. Alice and Michael visited often, bringing Sarah to spend time with me. Those visits became the highlights of my life. Watching Sarah grow, seeing the world through her innocent eyes, brought a sense of renewal. It reminded me that, despite the hardships, life had a way of surprising you with joy when you least expected it. Now, as I sit on my porch, looking out at the setting sun, I think about the journey I've been on. There were moments when I didn't think I'd make it through, times when the weight of betrayal and loss felt unbearable. But I did make it through. I survived. And not just survived, I built a life worth living. In the end, it wasn't about what I lost, it was about what I gained. Alice, my granddaughter, the peace I found in my own company. That's what matters. And as the sun dips below the horizon, I know that I'm ready for whatever comes next. Life has taught me that while you can't always predict the storms, you can weather them and come out the other side stronger than you ever thought possible.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode. Brother, I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.